Welcome to the Lapin Assessment. I'm extremely pleased to have with me this morning Professor Eyal Zisser. He is the chair of contemporary Middle East history at Tel Aviv University. Eyal, I'm very pleased that you can join us and our viewers around the world. How are you this morning? We just had a few sirens. Did they catch you as well?
Well, yes, but we got used to it. Although you never get used to, but such things. Let's hope it will finish very soon.
Absolutely. And it's true, we have gotten used to it as much as it's possible. I think that speaks a lot to the resilience of Israeli society. I've seen some chatter on Hebrew X where some, marginal voices are critical that we've gotten used to it. They call it normalizing. And I would say if this is called normalizing, then I guess that's what the population of London did in the 40s as well under the Blitz, which was obviously far worse. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. So it's interesting that even that has managed to spark debate on social media, at least here in Israel. You said you hope that it's over soon, and we certainly all hope that that's the case. So let me start with that because you already spoke about the timeline. How long do you envisage this war going? We have two active theaters. We've got Iran and Lebanon. Some have suggested that they're not going to end at the same time. How do you view the dynamics of each theater? Do you think they're unified, separate? How do you view the timeline?
Well, when I'm speaking about the war, I'm speaking about the immediate threat to the Israeli population. And as you rightly mentioned, I mean, it's not only that we got used to it, but also we have to remember also only a year ago, in April 2024, when the Iranian for the first time launched missile attack against Israel, we were speaking about almost 500 missiles launched at the same time against targets all over Israel. You could hear the missiles. It was impossible to intercept such amount of missiles. Nowadays, we are speaking about several missiles a day, and this
Yep.
shows that when the United States and Israel were able to eliminate at least part, I think, well, officials speak about 70%, 80% of the Iranian capabilities. So, speaking about bringing this war to an end, I'm speaking first of all, about eliminating, removing the immediate threat of missiles attacks from Iran. And then, well, the conflict can go on for some time. Clearly, this is the case when we come to Lebanon, where
Right.
I think it might take even several weeks or several months. But in this case, those who will pay the price, unfortunately for them, will be the Lebanese, not necessarily the Israeli population.
Right, right. And there's no question, according to the data that we've been shown, at least from military officials, the volume of each, the quantity of each missile volley from Iran in this war compared to the last war, there's almost no comparison. Instead of dozens per each volley, which we did receive in the first 2 days of this war, but then it dropped off very quickly. Since then, it's been, not more than a few missiles, several missiles. They don't give an exact number, of course. They've added the cluster munitions, but really, there's no question the data supports exactly what you're saying. So let's start with the Iranian theater before we hit Lebanon, because there's a lot of debate about the end game. Everybody's talking about the end game and how is this going to look like? And my, theory from really almost day one, and I'd love to get your take on this, is that the real trigger for this war, as far as the Israeli defense establishment is concerned, is removal of existential threats, right? I'm sure that our viewers understand that Iran cannot be allowed to hold 8,000 missiles, which was their target. We only need to look at what happened in Bet Shemesh. Every one of these missiles with its 1-ton warhead can destroy whole neighborhoods. And so when the Israeli, intelligence concluded that Iran had already built 2,500 missiles on the eve of this war, the decision was almost automatic. And then there's the separate issue of the regime change, which obviously we would all love to see, but that doesn't seem to be a military objective that can be, at the press of a button. It's very hazy. And it's much closer to the realm of political science than it is to military, the military discipline. So, how do you see the interplay of that? Because my concern is that the massive operational achievements of this war so far, which are huge, objectively huge, are going to get lost because everyone's going to be fixated on, is the regime standing or is it not? And that's how they're going to judge the mission's success or failure.
Well, I fully agree. And well, we need to separate from the media reports and what actually the Israeli and the American armies are doing on the ground. And I think the generals do ignore the statement made by the politicians and are focused on the military, on achieving their military targets. And you see it day by day. They are targeting the Iranian military infrastructure, they are targeting the missile arsenal, and they are doing well. When we are speaking about the military mission, it's much more easier and simple to be achieved. When we are speaking about political goals, well, here are other actors should get involved. For example, the Iranian themselves. I mean, because the idea is not to have boots on the ground and not to send forces to fight on Iranian soil. So those who need to remove this terrible regime are the Iranians themselves, and these are, you mentioned rightly, I mean, processes that take some time. And in some of the historical cases, we saw a clear link, but it took time. I mean,
Right.
it was a war, the war was over, and then sometime a year after, a dramatic change happened. So we need to be patient, and I think what we need to focus now is eliminating the Iranian capabilities. And in our wars in the Middle East, these are endless war. You win, and then the other side, your enemy, your adversary, eventually get up and prepare himself for another round. And the question is not whether there is another round or how long it will take him
Right.
and what are you going to do in the meantime? And well, I think the target of Israel should be eliminating Iranian capabilities, removing the immediate threat, and buying time. And buying time that will allow itself to achieve, political breakthrough, improving its position in the region, in the world, and so on and so forth.
Right, right. Oh, so I'm glad to hear that you share the same view. Now, when we do look at the stability of the Iranian regime, it's very hard from here, at least from my end, to understand how stable or unstable it is. It's obvious that a part of the war effort is going to try to shake up the pillars of the regime. The Basij are being hit, their headquarters. We see them, even their checkpoints are being targeted. So. It is incredible to see the IRGC and the Basij. For those viewers who are not familiar with the Basij, that's the internal repressive mechanism of the Iranian regime. They're really, cold-blooded killers and the main body responsible for reportedly killing 35,000 Iranians back in January, mostly unarmed. So they're still out on the streets, but they're being hunted. So it is remarkable to see the most powerful elite military organization, the IRGC, which the Basij is a part of, hunted in their own country and on the run and in hiding. Do you think that image will weaken them? And will it be enough, do you think, to eventually destabilize the regime? Or are we still lacking components, like maybe an armed opposition, an organized opposition? That seems to still be missing.
Yes, once again, I mean, hitting buildings or headquarters, it's not enough, and even hunting several checkpoints. I mean,
Yep.
they have dozens of thousands of people that are being paid and have a weapon. And well, we have the example of Hamas, where Israel successfully eliminated most of its military capabilities, but at the same time, the organization is still control those
Right.
parts in Gaza where Israel hasn't invaded and take over. I mean, when we come to internal political stability, right, there is no any organized opposition. There are no any prominent, acceptable, legitimate position leaders who can lead the Iranian people.
Right.
Well, as if in the case of Iran in previous protests, and as in the case of many of the um, Arab Spring revolutions that took place in Arab countries. Well, these are the masses who get out to the street and eventually are able to topple the regime. But we need to be patient, and I don't think that while the regime suffer major setback, uh, I think there are still enough forces within the Iranian society who support him, who are benefited from him,
Yep.
and it's going to be a long and bloody fight for
Yeah.
Iranian
Yeah,
freedom.
I tend to agree, and it's also worth recalling that by some estimates, the Basij is 2 million strong. Some say 1 million. Whichever way you look at it, it's many, many militia members with lots of guns, and that's exactly the component that seems to be missing right now in the opposition. We heard a lot of chatter, and talk about the Kurds over in Western Iran, and they are some of them armed, but it seems to me like that even if they present a challenge to the regime, it would be localized. It would be in Western Iran. It's hard for me to envisage them, destabilizing, let's say, Tehran, just because of the distance and the order of battle. Do you think that that was blown out of proportion, or do you think that Western Iran could be an important part of destabilizing the regime?
Well, it has a logic only if it leads to other rebellions uh, where there are so many ethnic minority in the Azeri to the north, the Arabs to the south, but I don't think it will come just like, I mean, somebody need to organize it, to fuel it, and well, that's actually what the Americans did when they had to fight ISIS. They didn't send American troops to fight ISIS on the ground in Syria and Iraq. They recruited local forces,
Right.
mainly the Kurds, but also others. Well, when the Kurds in Iran look at what is happening to the Kurds in Syria, who mobilize in order to support the Americans, and now they are being betrayed by the Americans, well, I don't think it's something that encourages them to join the Americans, but still somebody should take care of that. And usually in the past it was the CIA. I don't know whether the Americans gave a thought to this issue. Only if we witness the collapse of the regime, then we can see, like in Syria or other places, the rise of local and ethnic
Yep.
minorities. But the Kurds themselves, I don't think they are interested in launching a major attack against the Iranian regime and then being left alone vis-a-vis this regime.
Right. Yeah, it certainly makes sense when you look at, as you say, what happened to them in Syria, and they have other precedents as well, I think, in the Middle East. So I would understand that very much. So okay, so we don't know what's going to happen with the future of the regime. But one thing that I do say to people, there seems to be the public discourse seems to be trapped between this sort of binary, all-out, immediate victory narrative versus, the regime is standing, this is a failure. And my sort of, I would say, approach is that both of these are missing the point, and that the point is that the primary enemy here, which is the Iranian axis and its various tentacles, is systematically and gradually and unmistakably getting weaker from one war to the next, whether it's their launch capabilities, whether it's their terrorist proxy, whether it's their nuclear program, the three main pillars of their strategy, of the Iranian strategy, each one, I think, can be demonstrated to be getting weaker with time. Do you agree with that theory? Do you also identify that pattern?
Yes, sure, but our problem is that we live in a different generation. You mentioned Second World War. I mean, it took 6 years and people were patient. Now we don't have this patient, and this is the era of the reality show. The show must go on, but also have to be ended till the end of the
Yeah,
show.
yeah,
So if a TV commentator doesn't see any immediate results during the show, he will say, well, it didn't pay off and it's not worthwhile and we are losing. And you need patience when it comes to such a war against what seemed to be a very threatening and strong regime and state that Iran that has 90 million people living in it. So it can be, something immediate, and we have to be patient.
right, right. And do you see that the Iranian axis is getting weaker with time? Can you identify that weakness?
Well, clearly, what we see is, and we mention it, I mean, when we speak about the missiles, when we speak about other threats that are being removed and are being eliminated, when we see other countries getting courage, so it means they are less afraid of the Iranians. Everybody senses that, well, it's a wounded animal, a dangerous animal, but it's not the beast we tend to know in the past. But once again, it's very difficult. In Iran, there is censorship, the internet was shut up, and it's very hard to follow what is really happening inside Iran.
Yeah, yeah. Let's shift to Lebanon. This morning, the IDF announced that its 91st Division began what is a limited ground operation. They're not talking about a massive ground offensive. They're talking about a targeted expansion of what I could only really describe as the security zone already. It seems to be going in that direction. I don't know for how long. But there were already, just to give the viewer some context, before this war, there were 5 IDF outposts in southern Lebanon, right next to the Israeli border, and their job was to prevent the elite Hezbollah Radwan commandos, terrorist commandos, from infiltrating Israel. And that was critical. That was one of the big lessons of October 7th, is that the military always has to be in front of the civilians, and the Radwan elite unit of Hezbollah actually was supposed to carry out its own October the 7th on the Galilee, on northern Israel. In fact, that whole idea of a mass invasion by death squads was Hezbollah's idea, which Hamas applied in the south. And so now we're seeing a significant expansion of that. We don't know for how long, but a lot of more forces, an entire division and brigades are moving into southern Lebanon. They're beginning to clear out some Hezbollah-dominated villages that had been evacuated of their civilians. And we're seeing the Air Force very busy in Beirut and in other parts of Lebanon beyond this ground activity. So certainly, the moment that Hezbollah entered this war back on March 2nd, under Iranian orders, they are losing many, many capabilities and personnel. So where do you think this is all going? Do you think that this is going to be a different timeline from Iran? We also have a Lebanese government that is seems to be genuinely opposed to Hezbollah and to the Iranian chokehold on Lebanon. But how much power do they have? They want to negotiate with Israel. Do they have anything to offer? How do you view the entire Lebanese arena for, to make some sense of all of these puzzle pieces?
First of all, we are only at the beginning of the beginning because, Israel is rightly now entirely focused on Iran, and rightly so. So it hasn't shifted its look toward Lebanon yet. And what Israel is doing is, the entire northern part of Israel is being paralyzed because of the Hezbollah attacks, and still the Israeli reaction and the Israeli activity, I would suggest, is still very limited because Israel is focused on Iran
Yep.
and because Israel hasn't made its mind what to do about Lebanon. Now, you mentioned that there is a Lebanese government, but it's useless, and we saw it. I mean, most of the Lebanese oppose Hezbollah, most of the Lebanese want Hezbollah to disarm itself, but it wouldn't happen, and they will do nothing about it. We saw it during the last 15 months, and we saw it, during the last 70 years since Lebanon turned to be a source of threat and aggression against Israel first, and these were the Palestinians, and now it's Hezbollah. So I do suggest that Israel wouldn't repeat this terrible mistake and trust the Lebanese and believe and hope that they will do the job. They will
Right.
not do the job. Unless Israel is interfering, unless Israel is taking care of Hezbollah, nothing will happen. Now, what to do about Hezbollah? It's a difficult question, and as I mentioned before, Israel is only starting to retaliate and starting its operation in Lebanon. I can foresee that unless there will be an international intervention. I mean, Macron always hurry to save Hezbollah. So, unless there is pressure put on Israel, mainly from the American, Israel will go on hitting Hezbollah badly and then creating a buffer zone that will prevent Hezbollah not only from carrying out attacks by the Radwan forces, but also preventing it from launching rockets toward northern Israel, paralyzing many parts of northern Israel. And for that, it's not enough to establish yourself along the northern border where the IDF is currently. It's enough to prevent attacks by Radwan forces, but it's not enough to prevent the launching of the rockets. You need to get deeper to the Litani, maybe a little bit further north. We'll have to wait and see what Israel will do, but now it is its decision whether to bring this round of violence to an end and wait for the coming round that probably will come within weeks, months, or a year or so, or trying to handle the problem. And this is a golden opportunity. I hope Israel will not miss this golden opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Right. And you think that so far from what you've been able to see, the decision hasn't yet been made in the Israeli cabinet? They're still weighing the various options?
Well, I don't know if the decision was made or wasn't taken, but clearly on the ground, we don't see any sign that Israel did made the real decision in regard to Lebanon. I'm speaking about the developments on the ground, which, as I mentioned before, are extremely limited.
Right. Right. Now, one of the interesting things, one of the things I've been saying at least is that, when Hezbollah looks around, everything it sees is different. Israel is different. It takes the initiative. It doesn't accept Hezbollah's equations, by which I mean, Hezbollah was very used to saying, if we do this, we expect you, Israel, to do this. And if you go too far, you will see a response from us. So Hezbollah was basically using these equations to deter Israel. That seems to be completely gone out the window. They fired two small volleys of rockets, and Israel said, "Okay, you've entered the war. You've lost control of the situation." But another thing that they're seeing that's very different, of course, is Syria. They used to have an ally, the Assad regime, a fellow member of the Iranian Axis, a huge bridge for weapons smuggling, whether they came from Iran by plane at Damascus airport and then by truck into Lebanon, or through Iraq into Syria and into Lebanon. Syria was the main bridge that connected Tehran to Hezbollah and the Mediterranean. That's now been replaced by the very people that Hezbollah has been fighting for a decade in Syria, which is the Sunni rebels who are now the government in Syria. Ahmed al-Shara, his various rebel groups. The old enemy is now on the eastern border of Hezbollah. Do you think that this significantly weakens them? Do you think this changes the equation in terms of their ability to maneuver, to function, to plan? How do you think that this change affects Hezbollah's strategic situation?
Well, Syria was a critical, important link. I mean, because through Syria, the American and the Iranian delivered the money and the missiles to Hezbollah, and Syria was lost. But Hezbollah is still there. Of course, they are weaker. But what is the bottom line? They still can paralyze the entire part of entire northern Israel. So they are still dangerous. And once again, with all due respect to Shara and the importance of Syria, now they don't have it. And with all due respect to the Lebanese government, they are still a threat. And unless Israel remove this threat, they will continue to with Syria, without Syria, do what they are doing right now, and I think it's quite clear that Israel should not allow it to continue.
Right. So you don't think that the changeover of power in Syria has significantly restricted Hezbollah's freedom of operation, their ability to smuggle, or just generally, their sense of being closed in? Maybe they feel that they're being closed in from every direction, but maybe not. I mean, maybe you have a different view.
Well, what is the bottom line? They launch
Right.
rockets every half an hour. They cover the entire part of northern part of
Right.
Israel.
Hmm.
People in those areas cannot leave their shelters. This is the bottom line.
Right.
Whether there is an ally in Syria or there is no ally in Syria, whether there is an effective Lebanese government or there is no Lebanese government, I think the development on the ground, those are the important issues.
I see. Okay, let me zoom out a little bit and look at the way that the Middle East is perceiving the United States right now in general. I'd like to get your take on that, because on the one hand, we're definitely seeing, a completely different American pattern, modus operandi under the Trump administration. They're not frightened of using massive military force, of confronting Iran. And yet it seems that so many in the Middle East that you would expect to respond to that, especially the Gulf countries, but also others, they still seem to be hedging their bets. They still seem to be saying, well, we don't know if the United States is going to be here in 3 years, but the Iranians, might be. Do you think that despite this use of force and this change, the Middle East in general, and especially those that are supposed to be America's allies, are still not trustful of the long-term commitment by the United States to the region's security, because it seems that they're extremely hesitant, really hedging their bets, not going all out, not attacking Iran, the Gulf countries. It's surprising to some. How do you explain this extreme caution?
Well, you should follow also the ongoing debate in Israel when the war comes to an end and people are speculating about Trump. You can wake
Right,
up tomorrow in the
right,
morning and say enough is enough. And if that's what is being said in Israel, that's what is being said also in the Gulf states, and they will be left alone. Well, Israel is a powerful country, can defend itself, prove it during this war. They will be left alone.
right,
So I think it's very difficult, even in Israel, but also clearly in the Gulf states, to read what it is in Trump's mind, what is the end game as far as he sees it, what are his goals, and I think that's what lead to the very careful reaction and behavior of those Gulf states.
right. So that explains the way the moderate Gulf states are behaving. And then
Yeah.
we've got the Sunni Islamist bloc, which I guess you could call Turkey and Qatar as central members of this axis. I wonder if they see an opportunity here, because if the Shiite axis is on the historical downward trend, do they see an opportunity to fill the vacuum? Not only do they have good relations with the United States, but also, they might see an opportunity to move into the regional vacuum. If the Shiites are going down in power, the Islamists, the Sunni Islamists, might want to fill that vacuum. Do you see a danger there?
I think this is a possibility. I mean, because if Iran is becoming weaker, the Turks will be allowed to play a major role in Iraq. They are already playing a role in Syria and also in the Gulf states, especially if there is a need for protection and the Americans might not be here. So Turkey can benefit from the weakening of Iran, no doubt about it, and will have to follow it very clearly. And when we come to Qatar, so on the one hand, the Emirates is being attacked by by the Iranians. The Americans are protecting the Qataris, and at the same time, if you watch the Al Jazeera, it's like this is, an Iranian channel. So attacking the Americans. So
Right, right. So there's definitely that possibility. Uh,
yeah.
and and let me ask you finally, you mentioned Al Jazeera, and generally, your impression of not only Arab media but also Western media. It seems that in the West, especially in the United States, this war is basically being seen along partisan lines. If you're Republican, you're mostly for this, although we also have elements in the Republican movement, the MAGA movement, that are isolationists and they're against this, and the Democrats are mostly against this war. Do you identify a danger that many in the West seem to just simply not understand that Iran is a danger to them as well, to their security, that the Iranian missile program will eventually cover their cities, that their alliance between Iran and China and Russia is a challenge to Western security? Do you think that understanding is simply being missed in the West by far too many quarters?
Yes, for sure. I mean, they don't like Israel, they don't like Trump. So whatever Trump and the Israelis are doing is, like, for example, the Spanish Prime Minister is bad, is negative, should be rejected. And clearly, those people see anyone who stand it and clash with the Americans and Israeli as a progressive power, whether this is Hamas or whether this is the Iranian regime. So when you look at these things through this perception, you shouldn't be surprised uh, to find such antagonism to what Trump is doing.
Yeah. Do you think that anything can be done to help wake up these movements, these streams, these world views, or is it a lost cause?
I think it's a lost cause. They will wake up when, like in the case of Ukraine and Russia, the war will get to their step. Otherwise, I don't have any expectation from them.
Okay, now let me ask you a final question. Eyal, overall, in the long term, are you an optimist about Israel's strategic situation, or are you less optimistic?
No, I'm optimistic, but I think the challenge has nothing to do with the external threats, because Israel managed to deal with these threats. The question, what are you doing about it, and mainly politically, and how you translate your gains, your military gains, into political gains. This has to do with the Israeli leadership. This has to do with the Israeli society. This is the challenge we are facing and hoping. And I do hope that we'll see something happening, because we haven't seen anything happening this regard during the last several years. I do hope we'll overcome these problems, these challenges, and we see a different approach that will enable Israel to indeed becoming not only a leading military power, but also economically, politically, as it was some years ago.
Professor Eyal Zisser, thank you so much for sharing your insights. Fascinating. And I'm sure that our viewers will have a lot to think about from this conversation. Thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you.